everyone. So welcome to Murals and Movement workshop number 4. My name is Allison Popesky and I am doing the movement component of this workshop. So today we're going to dive a little bit deeper into what we talked about last week. So this idea of visual language and design. And I know on the movement end, we are looking at this idea of visual language in more of like a personal way, so less of a technical way. So this idea of creating our own kind of idea of communication based on the observations of what's around us. And so today we're going to go a little bit more into that, and we're going to focus specifically on this incredible poem that Bernie and I have been talking about by Maya Angelou called A Brave and Startling Truth. And then we are also going to kind of observe more of ideas based on our location. So location and the poem by Maya Angelou, A Brave and Startling Truth. So what you will need for this is to pull up the poem by Maya Angelou, and you can just pull it up on the computer, pull it up on your phone. If you want to print it out, that's totally fine. But just have it with you somewhere where you're able to access it. And then just a nice comfy space to move a little bit. So what we're going to do is I really want you to read this poem out loud. And I want you to read it a couple times. And I really just want you to again think of these 3 concepts that we've been talking about throughout this whole workshop process so far. So struggle, transformation, and growth. So Bernie and I both agreed that this poem, A Brave and Startling Truth, incorporates all these 3 concepts really well in a lot of different ways. I guess it's how it connects to you personally. I know for me, I definitely see the struggle, and then I almost feel more of like a yearning for transformation and growth. So just be thinking of those concepts as you're reading the poem a few times. And then what I want you to do is pick a couple parts of the poem. So whether it's a couple of words or a couple of stanzas that really stick out to you. And then I really, really, really want you to focus on those parts. So those words are those portions of the poem. And then those words and those portions are what you are going to use to generate movement. So for the movement, I really want you to keep it nice and simple. So I want you to whether just really focus on like a specific part of your body, whether it's your upper part of your body, your face, your hands, your feet, your legs. Just keep it really, really simple and really specific, because I really want the movement to be really connected to what you're reading, and then the space that you're in, and less about what's my body doing, where am I put my hands. So just choose like something pretty simple. So I'm really going to just explore my hands and then my upper body, and then just kind of let the rest of my body just kind of hang out. So so when you've picked the parts of the poem that really speak to you, and when you pick the parts of the body that you're going to focus on, then what I want you to do is to combine the 2. So I want you to read the words out loud, or the specific parts of the poem out loud, and I want you to go ahead and naturally put some movement to it. So whether some of your words, or I know it says in the poem a couple times, it says when we come to it. So for me, I have this urgency to kind of lean forward and then to bring my hands forward as if I'm like coming to something or approaching something. So don't get too specific into like, should my hands be doing this? But I want you to really just kind of, as you're reading the poem, just kind of let your body do the talking as you're reading the certain parts of the poem that speak to you. So as you're making these movements, while you're reading it, try to remember them, so that when you read it a few times with the movement, read it about 2 or 3 times with the movement, and try to see if you can keep some consistency of the movements. Try to make it a little bit more like streamlined so that you're essentially repeating the same movements to the best of your ability as you're reading the poem, the parts of the poem that speak to you. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of I'll demonstrate with a couple parts of the poem. It's really the end of the poem that really spoke to me, so the last three stanzas that really kind of spoke in a lot of different ways, especially focusing on these concepts, especially in this time right now. So I'm going to read that out loud, and I'm going to use my upper body to enhance this language, this poem's language. And then, so I'll do that as an example. And then what I want you to do is to do the same exact thing, but I want you to choose a different location. So right now, I'm actually visiting a friend in Las Vegas, and I'm in this like beautiful living room. But then I've also been kind of exploring this outside in the desert area in front of the mountains. And I've been reading the same parts of the poem, kind of playing around with the same movements, but I've been changing my location, and it's very interesting how the experience creates this different language for me, creates all these different like feelings and ideas, even though my movements and the words are exactly the same. So once you choose a different location, I just want you to try it again 2 to 3 times in that different location, and then just sit and reflect on it. Just kind of think, what about the location spoke to you in different ways? How did it feel? Did it change your idea of some of your thoughts, your ideas on some of your thoughts on the language of the poem? Did the language of the space around you kind of change or inspire anything different in your movements? So again, this idea of location is going to be the final component of this workshop number 4. All right, so I'm going to show you an example of the movement, kind of my simple movement with my parts of the poem that really spoke to me. And then I want you to try it on your own. And again, pick 2 different locations. All right. We, this people, on this small and drifting planet, whose hands can strike with such abandon that in twinkling, life is sapped from the living. Yet those same hands can touch with such healing, irresistible tenderness that the haughty neck is happy to bow and the proud back is glad to bend. Out of such chaos, of such contradiction, we learn that we are neither devils nor divines. When we come to it, we, this people, on this wayward, floating body, created on this earth, of this earth, have the power to fashion for this earth a climate where every man and every woman can live freely without sanctimonious piety, without crippling fear. When we come to it, we must confess that we are the possible. We are the miraculous, the true wonders of this world. That is when, and only when, we come to it. This poem is just so beautiful and so incredibly real right now. So, excuse me if any of my pronunciations were a little off. I don't want you to think too hard about words or your movements. I just want you to connect to this poem, create some simple movements just like I did. Try to replicate those movements as you really practice and connect with the poem, and then try it in a different location. And then see what that feels like, the differences, the similarities, and if that creates any different visual language experiences for you. All right, enjoy, have fun. Thank you.
Hi, and welcome to week 4 of the Murals and Movement workshop. I am Bernie. I'm doing the visual art part of the workshop. So as Allison said earlier, we're going to continue working with visual language this week, exploring that a little bit further, just getting better at not only understanding visual language, but also speaking it as well through movement and visual art, okay? So, and we chose the poem, A Brave and Startling Truth, as Allison mentioned, for several key reasons. One of which is simply that it's a great poem, right? I think we can all pretty much agree on that. And two, it also touches on some of the themes we've been working with so far in the workshop: growth, transformation, and struggle, as she said. And it also seems to comment on or respond to issues of racial inequality and racial reconciliation that are obviously taking precedence in our country right now. So we chose the poem for that. For those reasons, we just felt like it was a really good pick for this week. So then, what, in your opinion, was the brave and startling truth that Maya Angelou talked about in the poem? And then also, do you see a connection between the poem and what's going on in our country right now, the national climate of what's going on in the U.S. right now? Anyway, so we're going to review a little bit this week. We're going to kind of review some of the slides I showed last week just to get on the same page about visual language, kind of review some of those concepts so we have those in our backpack moving forward. And we are going to talk a little bit about design specifically, and also color theory in upcoming sessions. Okay, so you'll have those to look forward to.
I don't want to spend too much time with these images again. I just wanted to kind of show them again just as a review from last week. Again, just a reminder that the visual world, it's all around us. It's always communicating to us, from our buildings to the way we wear our clothes to advertisements. And again, it's important to be sensitive to the messages and the ideas that are being communicated in the visual world around us, and not just passive acceptors of them. And again, here's some examples of architecture that communicate very different things. Again, the designers of these structures had a specific expressive goal or intent in mind. And just even our body language, our gestures, and the way we wear our clothes all communicate to people whether we're aware of it or not. And so graphic designers get paid a good bit of money to associate their product or their service with a certain emotion or feeling or vibe that they are able to use visual language to portray, and use that to be able to sell their products to us, because we want to be associated with that certain emotion or feeling. And in the case of this Yaris, it's a sense of being kind of cool and hip, right? And happy. And even as early as the Paleolithic era, visual language was very much in play. We have an intuitive reaction or response to the way things look. And so this just shows, again, the cultural values of the Paleolithic people by the way that they're drawn.
Okay, so now that we've had a chance to review some of the basic concepts behind visual language, let's put those into practice, okay? So let's work with this poem using visual language, all right? So what I'd like you to do then is just to choose, go ahead and read the poem again, and choose between 2 and 4 key themes or ideas or emotions or even stanzas or lines of the poem that you feel like really speak to you and jump out at you, or that sort of capture the essence of what the poem's about. Okay, and then once you do that, what I'd like you to do then is to, maybe on some heavier paper, if you have some heavier paper around, like 80-pound paper or something a little bit heavier, that's good. If you don't worry about it. You can just use copy paper or sketchbook paper. So just take your pencil and see if you can describe, using visual language without using any images yet, okay, with your pencil, draw lightly and just kind of see if you can describe and express some of those key themes or ideas or concepts or emotions from the poem, okay? And then step 2 would be, if you want to, this is optional, if you want to, you can add a couple images that you feel like will give it a little bit more of a real world context, or have some, reference to observed reality, okay? So that's number 2, to add to those, add to your, kind of expressive lines from before. And then number 3 would be to take a Sharpie or some other ink pen and go over your pencil lines, maybe not all of them, but maybe the key ones that you feel like really kind of describe your drawing, that you really want to keep, and kind of make a little bit more bold, okay? So So that's number 3. Use a Sharpie. And then step 4 would be to use some watercolor. If you have it, you may not have watercolor around, but if you do, use a kind of a soft brush and a cup of water and just add a little bit of color. So we're going to get more into color theory in future lessons, but just want to start playing with color a little bit to kind of add something to the drawings, just give another sense of life or like one more layer to your drawings, okay? So just kind of go over some of the areas with watercolor, and I'll show you a couple examples from this one artist that I really love named Frederick Frank in just a minute here. So and then step 5 would be to, if you want to, again, this is optional, to kind of creatively write in a kind of expressive way some of the words of the poem to add to your drawing, okay? Oh, and I also wanted to mention the image that I have behind me was actually done by my uncle Fran Panza, who was a big inspiration for me as an artist, and it's called Gravitasia. So it's just, it has that sense of playfulness that I've been talking about here and there in the workshop. So let me kind of zoom in. Well, that's my hand. Here, I'll kind of zoom in a little bit so you can see some of this, just the playfulness of this drawing. So Fran is just really good at connecting a lot of figures together, making them move and just giving them a context or a container or a situation that they all kind of live and move in.
So before we start, I just wanted to show you a couple examples of the work by an artist that I really admire named Frederick Frank. I just love his work because it's so simple in many ways and so playful, but also very expressive. So if you'll notice, his drawings kind of breathe because he doesn't use a lot of heavy outlines. He only uses some of the basic outlines and contour lines to articulate the form, but he kind of leaves some of the outlines open so your eyes can kind of move within the forms, and it gives it a kind of an openness and a liveliness to it.
Okay, so what I was thinking is when I read the poem, some of the key ideas and themes that kind of jumped out at me were releasing, and I think one of my favorite lines is when we release our fingers from fists of hostility. So the feeling of clenching and hostility, and what does that look like with visual language, and releasing from that. So how can we show that? Anyway, this is just one example. So whenever I think of hostility, and there was a lot of violent references in the poem as well, so I'm just thinking like a feeling of hostility. So I would think maybe some sharp angled lines, some heavier lines, potentially conflict. Obviously, nothing is smoothed out. Things are tense. Things are maybe a little bit chaotic, right? It depends on what kind of hostility. Sometimes it's all over the place, so a sense of chaos with some heavier lines in there, possibly. Okay. So maybe this would kind of look like hostility, but then maybe there's this releasing that she talked about in the poem. There's this sense of releasing our fingers from fists of hostility. So maybe there's a gradual kind of releasing or flow kind of coming out of this. And again, this is part of the growth and transformation and struggle that Alice and I thought we both thought that this poem really touches on. So maybe there's a kind of a slow kind of releasing of this feeling of hostility or violence or tension, but maybe it's a slow kind of release of that. And what does that look like? Okay. So then when I think about, and you can certainly add to this some more, I would probably just keep going with this for a little while longer. So then when I think about images, what kind of images could I add to this? There was certainly a lot of talk about the earth. So maybe I would just kind of give it a sense of the earth, to give it some kind of context, so just kind of suggest a spherical, planetary something or other, maybe with kind of suggesting landforms potentially. You might be able to use color to kind of suggest those a little bit better. So maybe some kind of a sense of the earth or something to give it a little bit of a context. Landforms. It's pretty easy in some ways to pull off the earth. People just kind of believe it. If you just kind of put some green blobs on a blue sphere, people kind of believe it as the earth. And then what about if there was a releasing of the fist or something like that? So maybe I'll kind of put my hand in there. You could almost you could even actually trace your hand if you want to. If you want to use a hand, feel free to trace your hand. You can obviously find images online that you might want to use. You can actually put your paper over top of your computer screen and trace those images if you want to, but why don't you just try and draw them? So so maybe there's this sense of releasing. So maybe my hand is here. So here's my thumb. I'm just kind of, again, just notice how lightly I'm drawing here. You know, I'm not really caring, just kind of letting it go. I'm not really caring that much what it looks like right now. So I would probably keep playing with this, you know, so getting a sense of the hand releasing, right? So that was a big part of the poem. So now we have it at this state here. So then I'm going to take my Sharpie. This is a dark blue Sharpie. You can just use a black Sharpie, whatever you've got. And then maybe just, although mine's already pretty dark, you know, my lines are pretty dark because I was using graphite stick. But if you use a lighter pencil, like one of these old school pencils, then you may want to use a Sharpie to kind of pull out some of the key lines that you feel like really describe and express some of the drawing that you really want to pull out, right? It's just emphasizing. It's almost a little bit like making it a little bit cartoony in a way, but again, you don't have to go crazy with this, right? So maybe you just kind of choose some lines to really emphasize and kind of show a little bit more attention to or focus on, right? So just kind of, if you end up doing hands, and you may not, just keep in mind, again, the bone structure of the hand, the fingers. Look at the underlying structure behind them. I'm going to leave these fingers open a little bit because it kind of works for my concept of the feeling of released energy. Okay, so just kind of go over it some with the Sharpie here. Again, I'm going to kind of let you finish that. And then once you've got that, I'm just going to take a little bit of watercolor. So I've just got a kind of a relatively inexpensive, if I can get it open, a little inexpensive one of these, right? That you probably worked with when you were in second grade or something, right? So I'm just going to take some color to this now. And I've got a soft brush. See how soft this looks? It's important with watercolor to use a soft brush like this one. So you don't want to really use like a bristle brush or anything like that. It just won't flow as well. So I'm just going to get a little water. I have a cup of water here. This has a little mixing area right here. So I'm just going to kind of pull out some color. I might actually use a little bit of green for the landforms of the earth here. So maybe I'll just kind of glide over some of this a little bit. I think I might have picked up some purple from what I had on before there. But again, it's just fun to kind of play with this and just kind of play with these ideas and see if you can kind of give some kind of visual life to this poem. So maybe I'll just kind of bring out some of these landforms a little bit. So again, there's a sense of overlapping, which I feel like is part of the idea of the poem. Is there's all these different things happening at once, right? There's kind of a state of opposites that are almost existing at the same time, and that's what I'm going to kind of go for here with this sense of layering, you know. And then I could use a little bit of blue for the ocean if I wanted to, just to kind of, and again, just kind of give a little bit of a sense of that context with the earth. So maybe I'll just kind of go over some of this, and I can certainly emphasize these lines with my Sharpie a little bit, the landforms, to kind of pull those forms out a little bit more strongly. Okay. So just Anyway, and then I could, so for hostility, I don't know, I think of red, I guess. You know, you could think of red or black for hostility. So I'm just gonna kind of see if I can kind of capture some of that. And you can certainly go over this with like a red Sharpie. If you have colored Sharpies or like colored ink markers, you could certainly kind of capture some of that. Again, just kind of getting some of this feeling of hostility here. Kind of using some of the lines that I had gone with earlier. Maybe I'll start mixing those with the lines of my hand. So again, I'm not really that concerned about what this looks like. I'm really not. I mean, just kind of, I'm enjoying the feeling of playing with these ideas and seeing what happens, you know? So just letting it go and turning off any kind of judgy voices. Just noticing those voices if they're there. It's like, oh my gosh, this looks so bad, you know? So just kind of notice those thoughts, let them go, just keep doing it. Okay, so, and then maybe for the lighter part, when it starts to unravel or release, I believe the term that she used was release, then maybe I'll just kind of use a little bit more water in my watercolor here and just kind of capture some of that feeling of releasing. Again, you don't want to do too much with the color here. It's just to kind of add something, just kind of give a little bit of an extra, so maybe this color blends in with the fingers a little bit. So again, this is, yeah, my way of seeing this part of the poem, you know, and a lot of what I feel like the poem is about. So, okay, so I might just leave it there, you know. So again, it starts to go from like these warmer, excitable colors of hostility into kind of cooler colors. So again, we'll talk more about color theory later in the workshop, okay?